I was sitting in a class called Getting Rich. And so I was a pre-med student who for 4 years had only taken like biology, chemistry, physics, and doing all the right things. And by my senior year, I tried to take the easiest class I could possibly take on campus. I went to Duke at the time. Sorry, we beat you guys in the national finals.
Oh, good hearing. You broke up for a second there. You broke up for a second.
So I was sitting in that class, and basically my teacher, like you, had the foresight of bringing in a bunch of speakers, and they weren't all like the most successful people. Some of them were like really high up at JP Morgan or, run their own hedge fund. But then other people were just, people who had started t-shirt companies or a food truck or different things. Because the idea was to tell you, to teach you or sort of show you some things that will actually happen to you in the real world. Whereas I remember when I was in school, I learned more about what's inside a cell or like in a plant cell than I did about like the real world. And I just thought that was kind of messed up. And luckily that class Getting Rich showed me the way a little bit. And my biggest takeaway was the people who came in and talked, they were no smarter than me. They didn't know it when they first started. They didn't know how to do what they were going to do. They didn't even fully realize what they were doing while they were doing it. They were just kind of stumbling from one thing to the next and figuring it out. And and they were the ones telling us, they said, hey, look, if you're ever going to try something, try it while you're young. So try it now. Don't wait for experience. You get experience by doing things. And then the second thing was, look, even if it fails, this is America. We pat you on the back when you fail. You actually move ahead of people who didn't even take the risk. And they said, look, the hedge fund manager, I remember he goes, look, everybody whose resume I look at, they all have a, undergrad degree. They all have business school degrees now. He's like, how am I supposed to differentiate you from everybody else? Well, do you have a story to tell? Did you try something? Have you done anything that lets me believe that you're the type of person that can make things happen, that you're a quick learner? And so when I went to that class and I heard those speakers, that kind of totally changed my trajectory from going to med school, because I had done my MCATs, I was ready to go, to a whole different path, which I can kind of get into, that somehow, some way leads me here to Blab. So I'll pause there. I'll let you guide this conversation, so it's useful for everybody. You tell me when people start falling asleep.
Yeah, so nobody will fall asleep, I'm sure, because I'll put them on camera if they're.
We'll just check in. I'll ring the bell every time I get someone to fall asleep.
So and you guys remember too, if you do the /Q and have a question, feel free to ask that question as we're going along. But I am interested in that next step, because I think it's really interesting what you said, and I've seen that a lot as somebody who's taught at a university for a while, is that students think they want to do one thing until they get exposed to some ideas and, wow, I can do something different. So what is that next evolution in your journey?
Yeah, so well, I mean, the model's kind of broken, right? You're told at age 18, 19 to pick your major, pick what you're going to do, essentially. And if you don't pick, you fall behind, because, everyone else has picked and they're getting all their credits, and they're, you need to do certain things to finish. And when you're 18 or 19, you have no information to make that decision, right? That's the time where you have the least information about what you want to do. And of course, they don't really, you don't really typically shadow people or go do internships. That stuff is not the norm. I think there are some students who are smart, they're ahead of the game, and they're figuring out how to get that exposure. But for me, I was a very mediocre student. I remember calling my dad and saying, hey, like, if this school is pretty expensive and I'm just okay, right? I'm getting B's, but everybody here is pretty smart, and I don't know, if you want to ship me off to a different school that's a little bit cheaper, like, I'm fine with that. And he luckily, he told me, look, you're not there to get good grades. You're there to basically surround yourself with people who have a standard of excellence that's here, right? You told me about your friends, and you're feeling bad about yourself because your friends are ahead of you. But in life, you want to surround yourself with people who are achievers, who are thinking bigger than you. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yep. Exactly. So what was the next step then? So you decided, okay, the med school route isn't what you're looking at, where you're going. And that was 5 years ago, you said?
This is 5 years ago, yeah. So I had actually just tried sushi for the first time in my life when I was 21, and I loved it. And I was living a college student lifestyle where you eat Chipotle and Subway, and that's like your primary nutrition source. So I was thinking, I was like, why don't I combine my two loves here? Why isn't sushi available in kind of a more accessible way? This kind of like fast casual model where you could maybe build your own roll, like you build your own burrito, or you build your own salad, or you build your own sandwich. And so this was our, genius idea that turned out to not be so genius. But it did lead us on a good path. So we entered a business plan competition in our school, and although our business plan kind of sucked, we were pretty good at pitching it. And that's what those competitions are really about, is who could tell the best story. And so we told a good story and we ended up winning. So we had funding, we had advisors, we had a little bit of momentum, and we had, more than anything, kind of the most dangerous thing, which is we had belief, right? So we believed that this could be huge. We believed that this could be the next Chipotle and that we were the ones to do it. And so so my path went from, I had a decision to make. I could either go to med school or I could go do this really crazy sushi thing, right? And luckily at that time, I don't know, it's not that somebody told me to do it. It was kind of just a little bit of self-awareness. Like I told you, I was aware that I was a very mediocre med school, pre-med student, but I was also aware that I had never been working harder, thinking more creatively, or making more progress than I had just in those few months working on the sushi thing. So I kind of knew that this is probably the right route for me, because that's where, my energy, my natural passion is going. And it's not about sushi. It was about creating something from scratch. And so I got addicted to that. I did that business, and we started to succeed. We hated the food business. So I'll skip over some steps where we got like a Food Network chef to join on board and power the food and all that good stuff. But eventually we started making money, and we also realized like the food business is not where we want to be operating for the next 10 years. And so although people had told us that early on, we just didn't listen. And so finally, when we were actually sitting there doing dishes at 1 a.m. every night, and then waking up at 6 a.m. to go get fresh fish, and trying to figure out how do we hire people to do this job because we hate this job, we realized that's probably not a good business to be in. So we quit, and but luckily the way we quit was kind of elegant. There was a guy in Australia, and this is the funny way the world works. There was a guy in Australia who had just sold his company for about $400 million, and he had bumped into my dad on a business trip, and my dad, he just casually asked, "Oh, what do your kids do?" And that guy went home that night, and he Googled us, and he read our blog, and we thought nobody reads our blog. Like only our buddies from college read our blog. So our blog was very raw, very candid. And he just read through the archives, and he ended up liking it. And so he was like, you know what? I just cashed out of my business. I'm going to start a whole incubator of new ideas, focused around, energy, technology, biotech. And I need some startup guys. I need some guys like you. I have the science. I need some hustle. And so he flew us out to Australia, and he thought he was going to have to convince us to leave our baby. And little did he know, we were already ready to quit and just fold up. And so luckily he made us a pretty sweet offer to join him over there. And so we never even flew back to the States. We took we had the meeting on Friday, and we started on Monday. So I went from doing a sushi restaurant startup to doing a biotech startup in Australia. And then I can go forward about how I ended up here in San Francisco doing tech startups after that.
Yeah, so that's kind of the next part that I'm really interested in. And again, if you guys want him to Shaan to talk any more about anything in particular, you can actually shout out in here, or the ones who are attending live, obviously, or /Q and ask a question. But so what happened with the
Here, let's take a moment for truth. So somebody throw in the chat, just type in literally, what are you thinking right now? I'm explaining this story. Give me the truth about what's going through your mind as I kind of explain the story, or feel free to ask a question if you have one.
That's not somebody from class, so I'm going to hold the seats for calling in until somebody from class. Sure. Anybody have a question that they want to, or feedback that they want to give? And that's what, Kevin. Yeah, you click to join. All right, I'm going to have Kevin jump on.
Cool. You may need to mute yourself, Don, so you don't get the feedback maybe.
All right, you got your audio. All right, perfect. So, hey, I'm Kevin. I tweeted at you last week with a question, but I also have another question. So,
okay. I had my audio muted and it was still sounding weird. So I'm actually have Kevin come right up here and ask. It's gonna be smoother audio that way.
Yeah, because I think he's calling in and he's getting his own sound from the projector. Oh, look, you got Jift here in the chat. Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, so in terms of starting up, I know you said we a couple of times. Can you kind of elaborate on who we is and how do you determine who is part of your group while starting up, your business and everything?
Yeah. So my process was not scientific at all. It was my two best friends from college who, we didn't have, none of us had the qualifications to do this, but we were all kind of in that together. We knew we could work together. We would have each other's back, and that we were all quick learners. So we'd figure out what to do. So one of them, ended up becoming the designer. He basically self-taught him, self Photoshop, Illustrator, all these different things so that he could do the marketing and the branding. And the other guy who was an econ major, he went on the finance side. He made sure that our numbers were going to be solid, and he would take care of all those details. And then I was meant to just basically talk. And so that was my team then. And actually one of those guys, one of the co-founders, he joined me in Australia when we went, and the other guy, he works for Facebook now. So we all kind of, we ended up landing in a good spot.
All right. Cool. I was asking because I'm also pre-med too. So just kind of hearing.
Don't do it.
Well, you have to get Kevin. Kevin has to tell a little bit of his backstory, how he was featured all over the web last year for some research with colon cancer.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to be doctor, so I'm gonna try to keep doing that. But you never know, I can start a biotech company. Thank you.
Cool.
All right. So check in again with Shaan. What do you guys? Things going well? Things course correct on anything? And that's one of the things I love. If you ever get a chance to watch Shaan, and we'll talk about the town halls in a little bit, is that people who are really good at what they do ask for honest feedback regularly, and take it as a way to, okay, I'm gonna adapt, correct, move things forward. So does anybody have any feedback that we're way off base, since you guys are all being shy?
Yeah, my key question is this part of what you want to hear, right? So I want to be, you have speakers come in all the time to class. I want to be the best speaker you guys have ever had, right? And I tweeted this earlier. I want to see how many kids I can get to drop out, right? That's the ultimate measure of how inspired you were. Is did you immediately want to leave class and go do something, go make something that's in your realm, right? That's something you're passionate about. So we'll see how many dropouts we get at the end.
And the other thing I want to point out, so just remember, you guys, this idea of the props here. Now, you remember what happened to our Badgers in April, how we got ripped off by we have to beat somebody from Duke now. So let's talk about that next step evolution in terms of you starting to go into how you got to Blab, because we're talking a short window of time here.
Yeah. So I did this thing in Australia, and it looked like our project had worked. We were going to get invested in and do our biotech pilot in India, and I didn't want to move to India, so I decided I wanted to move to the mecca of startups. I wanted to come out here to San Francisco because it wasn't that I loved biotech or that I love sushi or whatever. A lot of people think you're supposed to do what you love, and I think that's one way to mess up a hobby is to try to make it your profession. My thing is I fell in love with the process of coming up with something from scratch and making it come to life. And so I wanted to come to San Francisco, where I knew that's what people did for a living. That's where the best companies were built, and I wanted to know why. And so I came here and I joined an incubator called Monkey Inferno, and Monkey Inferno was a place where this guy, Michael Birch, who's our investor, our founder, he had sold his company to AOL for $850 million back in 2008. And so you sell your company for a nice pile of cash, and he took a little bit of that cash and he started up this incubator. So we have a very cool office because he wanted to do it on his terms this time, right? That's the kind of the luxury of, well, if you're almost a billionaire, why are you doing startups again? Startups are hard. And his thing was, look, just because I made money doesn't mean I would stop doing what I love. And what he loved doing was taking an idea, making it happen, and working with just like a small team of people who you really like. And so he built that for himself, and he built an incubator. He hired about 20 people, and he said, we're going to work on our own ideas. I'll fund the whole thing. And we all own the action. So we get paid like a job, but we also got equity so that we own a piece of the pie. And Blab was actually born out of that incubator, that team. And so when I joined Monkey Inferno, I was just a product manager. So I joined basically lowest man on the totem pole. I was one of the youngest people at the company. I was 24 years old, and I had no experience in software before. So I don't even know why they hired me as a product manager, because I had never managed a product. But it ended up working out where 4 months in, Michael, who was the CEO, gave me his job. So he sat me down. I thought I was getting fired because it sounded very official. He was like, I need to discuss something with you. We'll go meet off-site. And for those of you who've never worked at a job, like when they take you off-site, it's like you're being taken out back to be killed. So I thought, I'm going off-site. I'm going to get fired. Whatever I was doing was a bit too much. And instead, he actually gave me the keys to the car and said, I want you to run this. He himself did not plan on, running a bunch of startups because he was at a different phase of his life at this point and, had accomplished a whole lot, but he wanted to be involved in a kind of different way. So I got to run the incubator, and Blab was, just a small nugget of an idea that came out of that incubator. And now we shut down the whole incubator just to focus on Blab because we think it's going to be huge.
So how long ago was that, timeline wise?
So I joined Monkey Inferno about 2.5 years ago, and Blab, we shut down the incubator to focus on Blab at this year, a few months ago. So about 5-6 months ago.
So we have a couple of questions in the sidebar. I'm going to ask you a question first, then we'll jump to those if you don't mind. And that is, why do you think now is the right time to do that?
I think that we had. It was really just a gut decision. So I really liked the team we had put together. I thought, man, this team is super strong and they're all really good at this beginning phase of projects. Before that, we had a lot of specialists who were good at building things, but not necessarily good at getting things off the ground. It takes a totally different skill set and hustle to get something off the ground than it does to just make something better and perfect. So you'll notice Blab is not perfect, but it is getting off the ground. It is getting momentum because we have people who are good at that. So I knew we had the right team, and I thought the biggest risk was if we just don't focus. So if we continue to have other projects, it's like the point of an incubator is to experiment with ideas until you find the one and you fall in love with it and you want to marry that one and you don't want to date other projects anymore. And so we were tired of dating, and it was time to wife up the project. So that's what we did.
So let's jump on to a question. Now, some of these questions are coming for those of you who are students. One of the cool things I see about this technology, and it's one of the reasons I love using this in a class, is that we're getting people from all over the place. We don't have 155 people or 107 active people in class. So unless some type of cloning has been done on campus that I'm not familiar with. But I want to jump in and ask you some of the questions and get your feedback.
Sure.
So I don't even want to try to pronounce the shady Briago. Totally butchered that, I'm sure. But that question was, just jumped away from me.
I think she asked, what do you think are some of the implications of live streaming and education? Is that the one?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think this is cool. I think calling in and being able to talk to a class is really awesome. But more than that is you can teach yourself, right? So we could have this conversation, and even if you weren't a professor, people could be learning from it, right? There's 108 people in this room right now. I don't know how many you said are in your classroom. So other people are benefiting from this conversation. So I think that it will help education, but not necessarily always in the classroom. I think it has more potential of being outside the classroom. I saw a professor doing open office hours. So he was teaching biology, and he was just taking questions from students who the students he taught were 15 or 16, but in college. So if they wanted to drive up for office hours, like their mom would have to take them to office hours. And so he was like, okay, instead of that, I'll be online and you just call in and ask your questions. And because of that, they were getting help. The other people who were in the room were learning as well because it's public and it's open. And so I think people will learn by doing. They will learn from each other. They will learn by actually jumping in and being a part of the conversation more than anything else.
And I think that's that's one of the reasons I try to experiment with these technologies as soon as they come on board. And I think for me, I have my biases. I see things in Blab that I haven't told the class all of it yet, but I will eventually, about where I see tremendous value. I've been live streaming people into class for a long time. And I love the idea of education being taken outside of physical walls, being able to extend beyond those physical walls. Do you have any examples I know somebody else, Nate, had asked a question about higher education that relates to this as well. And what was your question?
I actually just posted it there, but essentially how do you see universities using this outside of the professor or classroom?
How do you see universities, higher ed places using this outside of professors in classrooms?
I mean, I think you guys will have better ideas than me because you're the target customer. But some examples that I can think of are, at Duke, they flew me back to go speak to their class as a kind of alumni of the year. But there should be a series of alumni. Like every week, somebody from the university should be interviewing alumni. Hey, what are you doing? Okay, you work in finance. Oh, you traveled abroad and joined. You joined a company in Germany. What's that been like? Because those experiences are some of the things that students can learn from. Because they're going to be making decisions soon of, what do I want to do for my life? Where do I want to work? And it's really funny how these these decisions that you make early in your career, sort of set you on a certain trajectory. And I think hearing real stories and being able to talk to that person and say, and, really get a sense for what are they like and what has it been like for them would be awesome. So I'd love to see universities use it in that way, where it's not about a classroom. It's about connecting the alumni with the existing students without having to fly everybody everywhere every time.
I love that. I love that idea of being able to build that network, because as you know, I mean, it's so much one of the reasons that I love social. It's about building a strong network of people you have real connections with. And I love that.
Here's another example. Just before this Blab, I popped into one that was about sales training. And there's a lot of like tips of like, oh, how to be better at sales, or like a YouTube video, which is like, here's some examples. Actually, she just joined the room. Melanie, I think, was the one who was doing the sales training. But the way they were using Blab, which was different, which was like made for the platform, was they were doing live like role play. So it wasn't, here's 5 effective tips to be better at sales. It was, let's give me a scenario. Okay, I'm a dentist and I'm trying to start a practice. And you walk in, how do I do that? And they were literally going through it, improvised. And that was so real and so raw. And I learned more from like a bit of that than I did if I go to YouTube and try to see best practices, because best practices have a limit where it's kind of like, oh, in a perfect world, yes, I would do those things. But what happens live? How do you get those repetitions? Well, I can get those repetitions if I come on here and practice, or even just by watching other people do it. So I thought that was a really cool way of using it that, look, we all get bored when we get preached to, right? So like a lot of people compare this to webinars. I see a comment in the chat that says Blab is much better than a webinar. A webinar is rehearsed. It's typically, somewhat scripted and planned of presentation. And the viewers are just leaning back. And look, the way you learn is not by leaning back. It's by leaning in and jumping in. And so I hope that people get an education, even if it's not used in school. So I hope that people get an education by jumping in and being a part of some of these things where they can participate somewhat actively and not just lean back and say, oh yeah, that's true, but never like apply it, right? There's a difference between knowing it and being able to do it.
That's one of my favorite quotes is that knowing isn't doing. It's not the same. Until you apply it, you really don't know. So I love that. Another question we have is actually from Joel. Joel, do you want to come up and ask your question since you're here?
Joel.
Yeah, bonus points. All right.
Hey, so Skype just released a translator for their service. Obviously, you're in beta, and this is a relatively new thing. Do you see that, or what other features are you looking for in the near future to add to Blab?
Good question. I don't think we'll add that anytime soon. Mostly because it's quite difficult. We have so much other stuff to do. So one thing you'll learn with product design is saying no is the biggest challenge and your biggest weapon, right? You have to be able to say no to 90% of things, even if they're totally valid, just because it's no, not right now. And this is one of those where it's a no, not right now type of thing. We've noticed more and more Portuguese blabs. Today there was a French and Russian blab that were at the top of the page because people are discovering it in different areas. The good thing is that because there's not much text on page, you actually don't need to translate that. It's really the conversation that needs to take place. And so when I went into that Russian blab, for example, I couldn't understand any of it. I have no idea what they were talking about, but everybody in that audience did. They did understand that. So eventually, I'd love to be able to do a live translation, but that's a bit tricky and definitely not kind of on the immediate roadmap for a startup, right? Startups are basically resource starved, so you got to put every resource behind like the highest impact things. One of the things we'll say internally is this an everybody all the time problem, or is it a some people sometimes problem, or is it just that one dude being annoyed problem, right? And so you try to weigh out those different factors.
So what's the next high impact thing that you see then would be a follow-up question.
Cool. So the biggest thing we're going to do, and this is kind of, I guess, sneak peek to something we're announcing soon, but what you see today is that these boxes have people in them, right? So I'm in one box, you're in another box, and we could fill up to 4. But sometimes it's really interesting to actually talk about stuff and show stuff, and that actually can be really relevant. So if we can make it where the box can have content that we're talking about, like let's say, for example, I'm doing that same teacher who was teaching biology. If he could show a diagram or even have a whiteboard in one of those boxes, now all of a sudden the applications of this thing grow. And so if we turn those boxes into a programmable widget, that will be pretty spectacular. It will take a little while for us to be able to do that, but we can start really small and build our way up. So like it doesn't, I mean, if I want to do a poor man's ESPN and be here talking about sports all day, it'd be great to drop in YouTube videos or Vine highlights or, just a score from ESPN so that everybody sees what we're talking about and it makes it feel a little bit more, interesting because we can talk about stuff.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Cool.
That's an excellent question and great. Yeah, there you go. You got a bell. Hey, got a cool bell. But I love that idea, and I think that's something that's important to pay attention to. We've been talking about the diffusion of innovations, if you're familiar with the diffusion of innovations and how technologies are adopted, and being able to ignore the people who aren't in your wheelhouse and being able to, or features that are in your wheelhouse, is so critical.
Right.
Critically important. So what are some of the ways that you're getting that feedback? Because I've seen you guys be really, really good at that so far.
Yeah. I mean, we do town hall. So every time we announce new features or we just, have interesting news to share, we do a town hall like this where it's me and the CTO, and then we'll take call in. So we'll take people from the community and we those things go for an hour plus. So we hear from people there. Everybody, I tell people, don't email me. My Twitter is like the primary way. So people just DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open, are like at Blab. The DMs are open, so we can communicate with people that way. And the other thing is this thing's public. So we actually learn more through observation than we do from people telling you. When people tell you, it's usually like they're just highly irritated at that moment, or they, maybe they have a solution in mind that they're really attached to. And we don't actually care about the solution. If I can just understand your problem, I really trust our engineers and our designers to come up with really good solutions. So we learn, because this thing's public, I'm able to just browse through and see how people are using it and see where they're frustrated, see who's having fun, and see who's really getting value. And so we just actually observe and kind of lurk. And yeah, it's as creepy as it sounds. That's how we figure out what to do next, is by watching. And
that's one of the questions actually that Danielle asked was, do you want to come up and ask your question? All right, another bell. We get another bell for somebody else coming up.
While she's coming up, I'll tell you a quick story about lurking. One of my mentors at Duke, he used to work for Procter & Gamble for like 26 years. So he was the guy in charge of when they launched a shampoo in Malaysia, he needed to make sure it's successful. And the way they did it is called a take-home visit. So they would literally go into the home with the person and, no joke, watch them shower to see how they use the shampoo. And, like, for example, the idea of combined shampoo and conditioner, like, did not fly at all in certain countries. And they had to only learn that by going in and actually observing. So I thought, it can never get creepier than that.
That's true.
I was just wondering about some of the pros and cons of making it public, because even what we're seeing right now, and somebody else had mentioned it on the conversation board, it's a distracting thing, and there's constantly stuff popping up. You have the props that are constantly going and everything, right. And there's no permission, it looks like, to enter into any conversation. So I'm wondering if that's ever a problem, or right. If there's, I don't know.
Yeah. No. So there is a little bit of permission. For example, if someone calls in, the host can say yes or no. So like I can control who's actually on air, and I can always boot people out of the chat if someone's misbehaving. But the key is kind of like, there's a lot of ways to do a video call, right? Like I can do Skype or FaceTime or WebEx or GoToMeeting or whatever. If I want to do a face-to-face call with a bunch of people that's private, there's actually a lot of tools to do that. What we thought would be cool is if we make it where anybody who's interesting can actually get an audience, because most people don't have an audience. But if I really love to talk about sports, the difference between me and ESPN is ESPN has a channel. They have an audience. And so they can plug somebody in and they'll get viewers. What we wanted to do was build a really good tool, but then also a pool or a network so that there's no doubt in your mind that this is where I should go do it. Because when I push the button, I get 50 people. I get 117 people live in the room right now. And so for really good creators, people who love to, actually put the effort in to put on a good, a good show, a good interview, a good workshop, a good whatever it is, for them, the value comes from getting as many people as they can to see it. There are certain use cases where, like, if I'm a company or if I'm, a classroom, I might want this private, but, part of knowing who you are is knowing who you're not. And in this case, we said, look, we're not the best private solution. What we want to be is the best goddamn public solution on the internet. And the way to do that was to not worry about private. Maybe someday if we get successful, we can add it in. But right now, there's a bigger benefit of people serendipitously jumping in, learning something that they didn't know, and being able to be a part of different ideas and conversations that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. That's kind of the magic of the whole thing, is being able to stumble into a conversation that's really interesting that you would have never otherwise found.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
We have a question from Andy who is from outside the class about, are you involved?
If you just click the questions tab at the top of the chat, you can filter only questions.
Yeah, I've got it. I'm trying to pronounce it correctly. The XOCHI.
Xochi, yeah. So Xochi is Michael's wife, and they're both together. They are the kind of co-investors, co-founders in what we do.
Very cool. Is that you, Jordan, right here? Do you want to come up and ask your question? Oh, she's not going to get a bell here. So she's wondering, what made you decide to use Twitter as a part of Blab versus other social networks?
It's pretty simple. The Twitter bio that you have is actually a pretty good representation of the things you're interested in. So if I'm interested in startups and technology and whatever, that's probably what I'm going to blab about or watch blabs for. So just being able to use that when you log in and quickly know what your interests are. And if I tap your name, I know that you work at University of Wisconsin and blah blah blah. I can learn a little bit about you like that. Whereas if it's Facebook, you're just Don, right? A guy with a family and a guy with friends. There's not really that layer of who you are. And LinkedIn would have been too professional. Twitter was kind of the right thing in between, where it's your interests, sometimes your profession, but it gives you some context as to who this person is. And then we also thought it's cool because people will share. So the tell a little bird thing is pretty important, because that means good content can actually spread through the network, and you can tell your friends, hey, you should check this out. This is actually pretty cool. Or, you might find this interesting. And so Twitter is the fastest way to get a message from one end of the earth to the other, because of the way retweeting works. And so we just thought that might be cool.
Just out of curiosity, have you seen any spike in terms of interest going back into Twitter? Because there was this vibe where Twitter's kind of sliding down a little bit with resurgence with Blab. I know Periscope, they jumped on the Periscope bandwagon quickly, but curious if you've heard anything and about
I haven't heard it from Twitter, obviously, but from users. So we have a Facebook group called Blabaholics. It's just a community run thing. And some of there was a thread in there where they just shared look at my Twitter stats for the past year and look at it since I started blabbing. And you could just see this uplift everybody's getting. I mean, when I get off this, I'm going to have 99 plus notifications. Yep. I could think of the best goddamn tweet in the world and it would never get 99 plus notifications. I've tried for years. And so for me, I've gained, a couple thousand followers since starting Blab. And I think everybody kind of starts to see that lift, because if you watch somebody on Blab for 2 minutes, you feel like you know them. You know their personality. It's so raw that people will actually want to follow you, whereas everything else seems to be a little bit more crafted and manicured, and you don't really fall in love with the person, whereas you can on Blab. You can also hate them on Blab because you see who they are, for better or for worse.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the true powers of video, is exactly that, bringing down that barrier where people can't hide behind a social profile or just photos of their life, trying to put a perception up of who they are potentially. Not hardly anybody does that, but there are some people who do, and then you see them in video and you can't hide behind that, which is one of the things I love about it. When it comes to good Lulu Hearts question, is that somebody in this class? Yeah. Is that you? Do you want to ask it? All right,
I think the important thing is we're all learning each other's handles today.
That's exactly. Some of them have it, I can tell right away, and others not so much. Yeah, he follows back.
I follow back. Nice.
I guess my question is basically so he said it's not just taking a product and making it better. It's starting it from the ground up. So obviously you had goals that you set out, benchmarks, and you've definitely reached some of those. Are there any, what are those benchmarks, or what are those goals, or what do you determine to be success? When do you say all right, we did it?
Right. So we have a couple of fun goals. So when we hit 1 million users, we have something called Million User Monday, which is we get to all go, instead of going to work on Monday, we just get on a plane and go to Vegas. So Million User Monday is something I'm looking forward to. We're not quite there yet. We have another one, which is at 100 million users. Our iOS engineer has to get a tramp stamp tattoo. And then at 150 million, he can choose to defer. And if he defers, then at 150 million, one of us gets to actually do the tattoo. So those are some of the real aspirational goals. But as far as measuring the health of the business, we only look at one thing, which is watch time. So how many minutes a day, how many hours a day do users watch Blab, right? Blab is basically like an everybody's version of TV, right? Like it's like having a channel for everything run by anyone. It's like anybody can push a button and all of a sudden broadcast, which is pretty cool. And so what we want to know is, which channels on TV are we bigger than, right? Are we big? I want to be bigger than every channel that's on, basic cable today. I want our numbers Blab at night to be higher than NBC plus ABC plus Fox plus whatever. And so we try to think about how much time do people spend every single day? So I can't reveal that number, but I can reveal the average, which is the average user is spending somewhere between 40 to 60 minutes every day on Blab. So it's like they're watching an episode essentially.
So if you're trying to beat the next channel, like who is the next channel that you're trying to fight for? Who are you comparing to?
Well, one of the things I found was they don't release that number. So they don't actually even know, probably because again, there's no tracking. So they don't know if you're actually watching or not. Like Nielsen is a really imperfect way of measuring that. And really all they look for is a number of viewers. So like right now we've had 208 viewers enter this room, but we don't know how long they watched for. So we actually realized pretty quickly that TV actually doesn't even measure that number properly. And so what I want to do is right now we're so early stage that if we can get it where people are watching for, an hour a day, or, if they're watching for, I don't know, let's say 5 hours a week of Blab, those would be numbers that I'd be happy with on our side, on the user side. And then it's just a matter of getting more users into the top of the funnel.
Cool. Thank you.
Very cool. That's very cool. What's the number of users now?
Can't say, top secret.
Okay.
I'd say it, but I'd have to bleep it out with the bell.
All right. Made man DA, is that in our class? No, somebody from outside the class. So what are some features that Blab offers that other social networks do not? Oh, that was you. Oh, okay, Dick One. Do you want to ask the question up here? You got a bell? You can get a bell, though. You can respond. Don't you want a bell? All the cool kids. All right,
Don, you get the guest bell for him for asking the question. So, I mean, I think features is actually like a pretty shitty way to do business, is a feature competition. So, when you try to one up each other in features, you actually, two things can happen. You can make your product more complicated. So like we've all used products that just get more and more complicated because they keep adding more stuff. And the second thing is it's pretty easy for someone to just copy a feature. So what you really want to do is it's like crafting a meal, right? You want to put the ingredients together in such a way, whereas when the user takes a bite, it's just delicious. It's not having more toppings in it. It's about having that bite really stand out. And so for us, we just want the user experience to be stupidly simple. Like, literally, it's like even a human can do it type of thing, where, okay, you get a link, you click the link, and then if you want to join in, you hit the join button. If not, you sit there and it's all happening. You just see the chat going on. So we want to keep it very, very simple to use. And that's a feature, that's a benefit in itself. But beyond that, the unique thing is what we're doing, right? Having a conversation and having that conversation be open instead of closed. So we could do a Skype call, but that would be very different. It would feel very different. Whereas here, I can feel the energy in the room. Even if I'm not responding to all the chat, I can feel that people are listening, they're commenting, they're engaged. If I get props, I can feel that people are engaged with it. So we just want to make it feel almost like a concert where the people who are on air, they feel that energy, that love from the crowd. And then the people in the crowd feel like they have direct access, like the artist is just, fingertips away. So that the whole idea behind Blab is making that transaction where the host feels the love from the viewers, and the viewers feel like they got access to the hosts, and they're a part of the conversation.
Okay. And I know that you the purpose of it is to keep the conversation public, but is there any feature that will come up soon where you can minimize people's comments and stuff? Because it's kind of distracting at some point. Even if
what are you trying to do with it? What do you want to do? You want to hide the chat because
I was just distracted.
But why not just use why not just use Skype or Google Hangouts if you wanted to do that? I'm curious.
Because this is I guess this is just the public forum, so a lot of different people can come and view it if they want. So people can join the chat at any time, which is really cool. But for somebody like me who gets distracted really quick, I still want to be a part of the conversation, and I can
pull it up anytime like I have a question. Yeah, just put a piece of paper right there.
Put a piece of paper over it.
Never mind. We can just put a piece of paper right there and then be fine.
Yeah. I'll cut the papers. I'll mail it to you so you have a perfect strip.
Right,
that's a good point. Yeah. Take care, man.
Yeah, and we actually have a question from Jenny that I want to hit on, which is, what is the worst time to be on Blab? Well, she actually answers it. It's when you decide to go live on another Blab. So she must have lost a bunch of people jumping over here to see what was going on versus the one.
Sorry about that, Jenny.
Sorry about that.
There is no perfect time, and whenever we recommend a time, everybody just starts to do it, which makes that time go from being awesome to being really competitive. So there's no such thing as the right time or the best time.
Baked Alaska 59.
That has to be someone in the class.
Who's that? That's you. Are you really? Oh, cool. What part of Alaska? She's from Alaska originally. You got to come up and ask a question? Oh, you come up and ask both of them. So she's coming all the way down from Alaska, so she get lots of bonus bells here.
Hi, I was just wondering, you said you found your first employees, it was just your college buddies. How might some random startup go about finding particular people with specific abilities?
Do a Blab.
Is this for you?
Not for me, just in general.
Asking for a friend? Okay.
No,
So
I don't have a startup in mind. Just wondering.
No. So it's a good question. Obviously, you just want to sketch out what's the minimum that I need to demonstrate that there's a demand for the product that I'm building. So for some products, you actually don't need to build a whole thing, right? Maybe a lot of products start as a mailing list. So for example, there was a startup called Product Hunt. Have you ever heard of that by any chance? So it's big out here in San Francisco. Basically, every day it just shows you, the best new apps or websites of the day that you've probably never seen before. And so really simple service and very, very popular now. But the way it started was the guy who started it, he didn't know how to code, so he couldn't make a website. But what he did know was, hey, I can just make a mailing list using MailChimp or a couple other off-the-shelf tools that you just, you pay $10 a month for. And so what he did was he was just well, let me prove that people like this, that people want this, and then I'll build a website for it. So he started off just by telling his friends about it. And then every day he would just send an email about the best new products of the day. And then he saw that, hey, 50% of people open it up and they click all the links. So he saw, hey, daily, every single day, people respond to this email. That means maybe there is a need to know what's the best new stuff of the day. And he's like, maybe I can actually curate that and pull that off. And so then he built the website that would just deliver that experience. So I'd say the first thing is ask, do I really need to build anything, or can I prove the demand in some way, right? Can I fake it? Can I sell it? Can I use something off the shelf that's kind of imperfect but still gets the job done? And then if you need to still recruit people, my tip is if you want to finding the right people is really just a matter of chance, right? You want to be in the right place at the right time. But the only way to do that is to be everywhere all the time. So you got to be super public about what you're doing. You got to be really passionate about it. You got to take every opportunity you can to speak. Why am I doing this right now? Is because I want to project, my vision out as many places as I can, so that for the, the one-off person who hears it and it resonates with them, that they will find you then, and they'll say, hey, how can I get involved? And you'll say, hey, great. Do you have, these skills? And if so, they'll actually work for you, oftentimes for free. Every business I've started, I've had people working for free at the start because they were, passionate about, that mission as well. And so it's the best way to do it is just to be very public about what you're doing, and moreover, why it matters, why it's exciting. And if it's not exciting, then don't do it to begin with.
Okay. And my other question was, I hadn't heard of Blab until Don mentioned it. How are you marketing it?
We actually aren't. It's still in beta. We were actually just building the tool, and we put it, it's in public. So we were like, okay, if some people discover it, that's great. And we reached out to a few podcasters, a few people who are big on Periscope, and we just dabbled. We just tried to show it to a few different people to see, is anyone interested? And luckily some people were, and they started talking about it because it really resonated with them. So they started blogging about it. There's a lot of Periscopes where people just point their phone at the screen of Blab. And then we just got a whole bunch of users because their Periscope users are like, what the hell is that? Talk to us. Why are you talking to that thing? And then they just tell their followers, hey, come on Blab, and you could just call in and actually talk to me directly.
Okay.
And so we actually piggybacked off of podcasting, off of live streaming, of YouTubers, and we found people who were, they were looking for a tool like this, and in some cases they didn't even know it. But when they saw it, they wanted to talk about it. And you'll notice there's a lot of marketing blabs on Blab right now because the marketing community, A, they needed this tool, but B, they're very vocal. They're marketers by profession. So they actually did a lot of the marketing for us by being themselves and spreading the word. And so that actually helped us out a lot.
Okay, so basically just word of mouth.
Word of mouth, and now we're trying to get intentional about it. So we came up with this concept for a lightning conference, which is like a pop-up, like a conference that you don't have to fly to. You don't have to book a flight or hotel and buy tickets to because it's all online, right? Like what we are doing is, an interview. People can do a panel discussion. You could do all the things you do at a conference online. So we came up with, we'll do it for, DIY homemakers and podcasters and sports fans. And we picked a bunch of different genres. And now we're throwing little mini conferences, pop-up conferences for each one of those so that they all get exposed to the tool, through that.
Cool.
And you have one of those coming up, right? One of those.
In 2 days, the first one is called PodCon. I'll link you to it here. So
Vincent asks a very interesting question in the sidebar, which is, after what happened to Meerkat with the Twitter API, did you get concerned about the possibility of that happening to Blab? Now, could you explain what happened with Meerkat?
Sure.
For the students who don't know Meerkat and what happened with it?
So Meerkat's a live streaming service. You basically push a button and start streaming whatever you're looking at, and it's like this. It's live. You can see who's in the room. It got really popular, and then all of a sudden, Twitter cut it off. Twitter cut off something very specific. They cut off the ability for you to access what's called the social graph, meaning if I joined Meerkat and we were already following each other on Twitter, it would automatically match us. So it was like an easy way to kind of make sure that when a new user joins, they have friends. So they cut that part off from Meerkat because they were launching Periscope, which is the identical product and competitive. So aside from the fact that that's kind of like anti-competitive and probably should be illegal, besides that, we weren't really worried about it because when you're new, you don't really have anything to worry about. Like, if they cut you off, that means you got big. That means you mattered. And so all you really need to do is focus on getting big. If they cut you off, great. That means you got to here, and now you need to find a new way to get to the next level. And in our case, we're actually like, we don't like what we do is actually boost what people's like Twitter presence. So like when a blab is happening, so many people tweet about that blab, it's actually adding to Twitter. So we actually don't anticipate that they would ever cut us off because we are adding value to the system of Twitter, not taking anything away. And we're different from Periscope, so it's not really competitive in the same way.
Absolutely. I think that was what I saw a blab last week. That was Periscope or Blab, and the best answers I heard from everybody were both. They're very different animals, so they do very different things.
Totally.
Rita, I don't think is in this class. We don't have a Rita in here. So she has a specific question about, will you update the Blab app on the iPhone to be able to start recording from the app? Because for those of you who are, I didn't mention this, but right now I'm recording this whole thing. And this is one of the really cool features of Blab is there's an option to record, and then you get that as a playback as audio and video. So you guys will be able to rewatch this for the midterm because all our guest lecturers, there's a midterm question about
Nice.
what they talked about. But I'll let you answer that question about whether or not that app exists or if it's going to be coming out.
Yeah. No, it exists. You can, so right now, if you go to the App Store, you can just search for Blab and you'll find the app. And when you're on the app, you can do almost everything that you can do on the web. So you can start a Blab, you can, talk to people, you can watch Blabs, you can record Blabs. So you can do all of that right now. So like I will go in here, I'll try to mute my volume, but this is what it looks like right now on my phone. When the video loads, you'll see it.
Has anybody used it on their phones? I've always used it on my, what's the experience like for you on the phone? Pretty much the same? Okay. Smaller.
I was having a problem. I was doing online last week.
You were having problems with it?
Well, because there isn't an Android app.
Oh, is there an Android app?
Not yet. It's coming.
I was using it on Google Chrome, and I would try to type a question in, but the screen, the website didn't move down to show what I was actually typing.
So you can see what you're fully typing in. Okay.
It's pretty miserable on Android Chrome right now. Yeah, sorry about that. There will be an Android app. We just want to get it right first before we get it right, on 2 platforms before we add a third in.
Now, the one thing that I know, and I don't know if you can say a potential ETA for that, is you guys have been really good at releasing quickly high value items, and I would assume that you're getting a lot of requests from the Android side. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we try to move as fast as possible. I mean, look, this is our office. Somebody sleeps over here on this couch right now. There's 5 different people who are sleeping in the office, which is not ideal. It's the short-term thing, but it kind of illustrates like the hustle that goes into this. I mean, if you were on Blab from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. my time, Blab was down. It was like not working properly, and that's because somebody pushed an update at 3:30 in the morning, and it didn't sit well. So those things happen, and actually, like we don't care. We value like moving slow and being cautious will kill us 100%. Moving fast and occasionally making mistakes, we can live with that. That's how we can win, because otherwise, what differentiates us from every big company? Well, big companies are slow. That's the only advantage we have, is we're flexible, we're personable, and we're fast. And so we just have to, our startup has to be those things.
Which is, I think, an overall theme of why social has been so powerful for so many organizations since it started, is that it's really leveled the opportunities for small organizations to get going. There's a couple of questions I don't know if you'll be able to answer from Robin's World about how many minutes of viewing is happening every day, and the total number of viewers on Blab on average per day.
Can't say either of those, unfortunately.
Top secret. He could tell us, but then he'd have to,
I'd have to, yeah. I wouldn't want to do that to you.
Scribbling Bandit, it looks like. Is that in class? Is that in class? No? If Blab is free to use, how are you going to remain sustainable? Which is a question I hear a lot from when you see startups like this in the tech space. So is that something you can talk about?
Yeah. So, I mean, right now, Blab does not make money. It costs money to us. And so, but that's the plan. I mean, what we didn't want to make was a tool where all the people who are putting in the effort, right? Like what you're doing right now, it takes effort. You wanted, you had to plan this, you had to set it up, and you wanted to put on something interesting for people. What we don't want to do is charge the people who are also doing all the work. So instead, what we want to do is grow the audience so that, we have so much good content every day that, millions and millions of people are visiting and spending millions of hours watching. And when that happens, we would be able to advertise against it or figure out a business model that makes sense, where not only do we get paid and we cover our costs, but actually those creators who are putting on, daily or weekly shows, they make money as well, right? It's almost like YouTube, almost like the YouTube model. So we're pretty far away from figuring out exactly what that looks like. That's just kind of our hypothesis. But the beauty of it is we don't have to. So one of the benefits of being, well-funded by somebody who's, sold a company before and has, has made, hundreds of investments himself, is that we're bankrolled to just focus on product and growth and not have to worry about making money now when actually the business model doesn't fit. And so what we're going to do is continue to focus on growing, and hopefully if the numbers just keep going up, we'll be able to raise more and more money and basically let the venture capitalists pay for the growth, so that when we get to scale, like Twitter did, like Facebook did, like Pinterest did, like YouTube did, you can start to monetize on a big user base. So that's been sort of proven in social. I think Ev Williams, who's the founder of Twitter, he had a good line, which he goes, social products that, have millions of users and people love it and use it every day, not making money, that's never been the problem. So like it's a non-existent problem to have a product that millions of people around the world use every single day and love and not be able to make money off of it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly, obviously you know that arena better than I do, but studying these for a while, if you have an audience base that's using and is passionate about using, being able to monetize isn't an issue. It's that you have to get those passionate users first who feel like this is a part of what they do, and they need it.
Right. So let me ask you a question. So you got a classroom full of students there. What are they supposed to learn out of like taking this class here? What are they supposed to know at the end?
Wait a second. That's top secret knowledge. Well, ideally in this particular course, it's looking at and understanding how technology has changed the way the world operates, and understand the pluses of that, the minuses of that. And then for this particular class, in my other class, we work with a generator, which is an incubator in Madison. It's rated as one of the top 15 incubators in the country, and we work with startup businesses there. In this class, we work with cause marketing businesses and organizations. And so what they take, the first part of the course, is they learn about the concepts of tools, technologies. They're broken up into groups right now where they're doing deep dives on the different tools, and then they're going to present to the rest of the class what you need to know, kind of the Pareto principle, what's the most important things to know. And then the second half of class, we work with, and I think it's going to be about 8, mostly nonprofit organizations, and we're going to be building social strategies for them based around what we've learned and saying, hey, if you do anything on social, if you want to make a big impact, this is what you do. And hopefully by having people like you come in, they learn to think deeper about who they are, what they're about, and challenge some of the preconceived notions that a lot of people give, where you go to school, you're supposed to get a doctor or become a lawyer or whatever it is, and say, there might be other things to check out.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is know that the world is changing, right? If your class is, if you're looking at how technology is influencing the world, the biggest hotel chain right now is Airbnb, and they own zero real estate. Right? The biggest taxi company in the world is Uber, and they own zero taxis, right? Facebook is the biggest media company in the world, and they employ zero writers. There's a big change going on in how these companies are built. In the same way, we're hoping to be the biggest TV network in the world with zero actors, zero producers, zero directors. And so how do you do that? Well, you use technology as this amazing leverage, as this amazing way of changing the rules to the game, right? You're not going to beat Hyatt or Marriott. If you're Airbnb, you're not going to beat them by buying better real estate and building bigger hotels. You can never beat them at that game. Yep. What you can do is invent inventory by taking spare bedrooms in people's houses. Same thing with Uber. You can't beat the taxi system by making a better taxi, right? It's like the idea is you don't want to go into a knife fight and say, I have a sharper knife. You want to go into a knife fight with a magic wand and change the rules and completely break the system.
Or a lightsaber,
Yeah, lightsaber. Whatever it is. Just don't go in with a sharper knife. And I think 90% of businesses in this world are trying to say that they have a sharper knife. And really that's just a race to the bottom, because as soon as somebody else sees how you sharpen your knife, they'll do the same. And it's just kind of this never ending race. And so instead you want to change the rules to the game. You want to change the laws by which the game is played, so that for us, for example, I don't need to make the best sports show. Right. I don't need to compete with ESPN head on and say, I'm going to have a higher production value. I'm going to say, well, what if I had around the clock coverage of every team all the time? Because ESPN can't do that. They only have, a couple of channels, and they have to choose what show goes on for this next 30 minutes. But on Blab, I can have any number of shows going at once. I could cover not just the NFL, I can cover the Oakland Raiders, and not just the Raiders. I can cover this one player. I could literally have a show about any angle, because I don't have to pay to produce it. ESPN has to pay. And so I get to just inspire users to create content that they might like. So I think the net takeaway for all this stuff is that the way technology changes things is by changing the rules to the game. That's what disruption actually means. It's not just, we're going to do it cheaper, or we're going to do it faster or better. You have to really come at it at a totally different angle.
Absolutely. I think that's incredibly important to keep in mind, is how when you keep, and for you guys in particular to think about, when you keep in mind the way things have been done, if you're married to just how the way things have always been done, you can easily be left behind, because the rules change all the time.
Let me give you guys an example in social media, right? So there's a lot of people who claim to be kind of like social media experts. They can help your brand, get visibility on social media. And then everybody's just doing the same thing. And when everybody does the same thing, nobody stands out. It's like the opposite of marketing. So instead, I met this kid. He was 20 years old when I met him. And what he had done was very clever. He had gotten a collection of Twitter pages that were like, in class, I don't know if anybody here is on Twitter. They follow like these, like really like the funny joke pages. So like on Instagram, the Fat Jewish is a good example of this. On Twitter, there's like, shit my teacher says, or whatever, right? There's just funny little gimmick pages. So like, I don't know, show of hands in class if you follow any of these like fun joke meme pages. How many have we got there?
Pretty much everybody.
Right. So he knew this. He said, I'm targeting college students. College students show like they follow these types of pages. So what did he do? He figured out that these pages are actually run by just like 19-year-old kids a lot of times. Like a Harry Potter fan page that has 2 million followers is just run by like a 17-year-old kid who makes no money off of it. He just happened to luck into that type of following. So what he did was he made an agreement with all of them. And he said, hey, guys, together in aggregate, he didn't tell them this, but he realized it. Together in aggregate, this is like 60 million, 100 million followers across all these pages. And the thing is, it's not just followers. It's the same people who follow multiple pages. So now what he did was on a given day, when he wants to launch a product, he would post from all those pages on the same day at the same time. So it felt like if you logged into Twitter that day, it felt like everybody is talking about this app. And he named the app Tippy Tap. It was a game. So everybody was talking about Tippy Tap. And it wasn't just talking about it like an advertiser would, where it would be, hey, check out this new free app on the App Store. It's rated 5 stars. It was, oh my effing God, I want to throw my phone out the window. Tippy Tap is so addictive, right? So he was posting like it was just what somebody would say if they were addicted to this game. There was no links. So everybody else was just saying, what is this Tippy Tap? I'm missing out. It seems like everybody knows about it. I'm the only one who doesn't see it. It started to trend on Twitter. And he had the #1 game in the store, and he was making, 6 figures every month off of this one game. And what he realized is he turned that into an agency of kind of like influencer marketing. So now this kid, he's got a company of 25 people. The average age at the company is 22 years old. They consult with Universal Studios. And, if you want to make a movie, have like opening weekend buzz, and like, he'll just go to the movie studio and say, what do you want? You want your movie to be scary? Okay, I'll get everybody on Twitter saying that this movie is scary. And boom, he bought word of mouth like that. And so there's these amazing ways of attacking social media that are not what you see. Like what you see if you watch like a how-to is already out of date. So if you really want to be great in these fields, you got to be coming at it again at a different angle, changing the rules of the game. And those are the things, the ones that are succeeding. Those are things that there's very little written about them because they're actually working still.
Yeah, absolutely. That's got a question back there? Or you just, sorry. I thought we had a question. That's one of those things to think about in terms of those changes to the playing field and where things are going, to think about how, and you have to think about the ethics. That's one thing we talk about in the class is the ethics of, okay, these things can happen. Well, is that good or is that bad?
Right.
It obviously depends when you stop and think about it. We have a question from Kevin. Kevin asked another question. Did you want to come up and ask it? Again, he wants to come up and ask it, so he gets the double bell. He's a Bears fan, so we need to increase his self-esteem,
He's a returning alumni question. Okay, what's up, man?
Oh, sorry. So, kind of like going back in your past, as you said, you was a pre-med. And if you can go back and change one thing, what would it be?
Oh, man. There's a lot of things. I think the biggest thing was like, you know how I'm talking about like playing by different rules, like changing the rules of the game. When I was in school, I was at one of the best schools in the country. I had access to the best teachers. I could have done pretty much anything I wanted to, but I was doing, it wasn't that I wasn't working hard. I just wasn't working any differently than anybody else. So for example, I would go to class most of the time, sometimes skip, and I would do the homework, but like, everybody was doing the homework. I was never doing anything different than anybody else. And I realized that all the reward, if I had just spent a little bit more time getting to know some of the really cool professors, like having 1 or 2 professors who have your back will go so far as a letter of recommendation or introducing you to the right person. Or same thing like I was saying with alumni. You know how many CEOs come out of Duke that are like are alumni of Duke? And if you just say, hey, I'm a student from the school. I'm really I would love to learn from you. Can I shadow you for 1 week this summer? Odds are if I email that to 50 people, somebody's going to say yes, and I can actually form a connection with somebody. So I guess I was not learning so much. I was not learning by doing. I was learning by being passive. I was just sitting in class, doing my assignments. I wasn't thinking for myself or thinking any differently than anybody else. And I have access to all these resources, all these people, but I never leveraged it. I never did anything with it, right? And so only at the end, when I started doing that startup competition, did I actually start to meet these people and go out to lunches with them. And hey, I would skip class because I was doing something much more important, right? I was actually making moves, but that light bulb didn't go off for me till my 4th year. So I would have loved to have started that a little bit earlier in my college career, because that's just time. I could have been, meeting more interesting people, learning more about the world, and not just doing enough to get by in class. I would have rather done worse in class, but done more on the side of, actually building relationships with people who, I have access to.
What would you say contributed to the way that you used to be?
I guess it's just conventional thinking, right? Like, it's monkey see, monkey do. Most of my friends just did the same thing. And like it really was like a light bulb moment where it's like, when you meet some people who, there's like a trigger, right? So for me, I was sitting in that class, like I said at the very beginning, I was sitting in a class called Getting Rich, and I heard these people talking about how they stumbled their way through and how they did things a little bit differently, but that led them to this really interesting place with these interesting stories. And I wanted that. I wanted to be like them. And I just said, okay, well, what would they do in this situation? Right. I remember one guy in class, he was an investor, and he said, all right, who's got an idea? And the class was kind of like about entrepreneurship, and nobody raised their hand. He just scanned the room from left to right, and nobody raised their hand. And I was like, shit. And I was sitting at the very end on the far right side, and I said, I have to raise my hand here because this guy came here to speak, and he's thinking, I'm at an entrepreneurship class, and not one person has a business to pitch, like even just an idea. And so I pitched it, and that one, like being ready to kind of like seize those opportunities was something I wasn't doing earlier, but I started doing later. So I would say think differently. Like, for example, I'm in this class right now. You all have access to me, my Twitter account. You can get my email from Don. You can find a way to get to me. Most of you won't. But for the few of you who will, maybe I can help you get where you're trying to go, whether you're pre-med or you're in business or software, whatever you want to do. Maybe there's a way where I can be a sounding board for you or connect you to the right person. It's just on you if you're going to take advantage of those situations when they arise.
All right, cool. Thank you.
We're getting close to the finishing time, so I want to quick go through the sidebar here and see, is there any question that you want to make sure to hit on?
Well, this one person's asked a couple times, so I want to answer. Her Karma Project Company is her name. So she said, when did you realize that you created something really special? Which is cool because it's just a compliment, not even really a question. I don't know. I get really excited about a lot of ideas because I think a lot of ideas could be really cool, but not all of them catch fire, right? Not all of them capture the imagination of people. Like Don, when you emailed me about sitting in this class, I think you said, I'm 100% sure that Blab is a game changer. Like that's not normal for people to look at a beta product and think that and say that. And so those things give me faith that, hey, I'm not just delusional, that this one actually, not just me thinking it's cool. I think other people will think that this is a game changer as well. And so we were lucky to find the right early adopters, the people who have a vision, who say, look, it's not that it's there today and it won't even be there in 3 months or 6 months, but this has the fundamentals to be game changing. And so we were lucky to kind of like get the right people on board at the beginning.
Now, I have one last question I know I want to ask. Before I ask it, is there anybody who has a question that they want to make sure to get on screen with Shaan and ask him? Remember what he just said like 2 minutes ago about how to take advantage of opportunities? There's somebody sitting there saying, should I raise my hand? Should I raise my hand? You can do it. It's a safe environment. All right, Lexi is going to come up.
There it is.
And I like the sign behind you, by the way. Keep calm and love monkeys.
That's right. Okay. What's up, Lexi?
Sorry. So I asked this earlier. I was just curious, do you think there's any way that Blab is going to be used in ways that you don't want it to be used? And how do you expect to deal with a problem like that?
Good question. I'm a pretty open-minded guy, and I think this will be used in a lot of ways. I think ultimately we need to just be a platform. So like we need to just be a tool and a platform that people can use in whatever ways they want. We do draw the line at like things that are illegal, hateful, very offensive, things like that. But like I'll give you an example of kind of a gray area, because you got to think about these things when you're the CEO, right? It's like what happens with nudity? So like we have a rule, which is, you get banned for unwanted nudity. So if you just come on screen and you got the chat roulette thing going on and you're naked, you can get banned for that, right? You can get permanently banned. But if there's a Blab that for some reason it's not unwanted, maybe the host has set the rules for that, set the expectations that that's what's going on here. Do we ban that? I don't know. I mean, who are we to really censor? So right now we do a little bit more curation and like featuring than I would like, because of the way the homepage is set up, where we just show most of the content that's out there. We show most of it publicly. So we try to, make sure that it gives a good representation, because we have all these new people coming, celebrities joining, whatnot. And they look at the homepage and they're deciding, is this for them? So right now that's our storefront. So we kind of manicure it a little bit, but when we make a change, and that's no longer the case, and everybody's home feed is personalized to the people that they follow, we won't have to do that anymore. Because if I talk about super weird stuff, if I'm a foot fetish guy and I just want to talk about foot fetishes all the time, well, only my followers who care about that will actually find it. So it'll kind of naturally sort itself out. And so we need to, so right now we're a little bit more cautious because it's early days. It's like when you have a baby, you don't want it to get all those germs on it. But over time, it's just got to have a strong immune system. It's got to be able to take on any germs that come into the system. And so right now we're a little careful. Over time, we'll be less careful.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
All right. I have one more question that I want to ask before we finish up, and that's about your morning routine. And I think it's really important life thing to think about. I get up, I do a class at 5 a.m., so I'm up at 4:15 a.m. and do some of the similar things to you, but it's coming from an old guy when I say it. So can you talk a little bit about morning routine as a part of, from a young student perspective, young guy perspective, what you do and how it helped you?
Yeah. So I think the biggest problem that I have as far as being kind of like the best version of myself is that I'm not a morning person. And so, and that I used to say I'm not a morning person. I'm not a morning person. And that's not true. Like these things we just say about ourselves are not true. We make them true by saying them over and over again. And what it really was right now, I don't get up early in the morning. I don't have a morning routine. And so I started to change that because, you can change things so quickly if you really just set your mind to it and have a strategy. So I started a new routine where basically I had tried so many other things and they had failed. I tried going to the gym in the morning, but it failed because eventually I don't have that hour and a half to go to the gym, come back, shower and all that, go to work or go to school. So even these things I started with good intentions, my New Year's resolutions eventually would drop off. And I went to a Tony Robbins event, and Tony Robbins said one thing that just stuck with me. He goes, I have a morning routine that takes 10 minutes. And if you don't have 10 minutes, you don't have a life. Because no matter how busy you are, if you cannot make 10 minutes, you do not have a life. And so my morning routine is 10 minutes, and it's really simple. No matter what time I wake up in the morning, even if I'm already 10 minutes late, I just text that person, hey, I'm going to be 20 minutes late because I got to do my 10 minutes. So my 10 minutes starts with 3 minutes where I just do something physical to wake my body up. So whether it's a breathing exercise or it's push-ups, I just do something because literally you can change the way you feel. You won't feel tired if you do 15 push-ups right now. I guarantee you, no matter what it is, you will wake up if you just move your body. So 3 minutes of kind of waking my body up. Then I do 3 minutes of gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most powerful emotions in the world, where you will never be stressed or angry at the same time as you're grateful. So I start my morning thinking about what I'm grateful for. And I very specifically, I don't just say like, oh, I'm grateful for my family. That doesn't work for me. I think about specific moments in my day, like when that guy, reached out and gave me that extra thing, or when I saw my niece running, and I just kind of have a visual memory of like that moment. That really works for me. So 3 minutes on gratitude, and the last 3 minutes is focus. So I try to think of what's the one thing that I want to get done today. And it doesn't even have to be work related. If it's like, I'm going to the gym today, okay, I will get crystal clear that that's my focus. If I was in college, that might've been like, I am going to talk to that girl today, right? I would have come up with the one thing that like my day is a failure if I don't do this one thing. And my day is a success if I do this one thing. So my to-do list is one item always. Because I used to make big lists and then do some of the non-important things and leave the others. And it just became so stressful. Eventually I would stop looking at it. So my morning routine, that 10 minutes literally changed my life. So my life quality has gone up. My productivity has gone up. Everything has gone up since I've implemented that.
So remember that, college students, when you say, you don't want to get up in the morning, how important that is. Well, thank you so much for the time today, Shaan. I know we have more questions, but I'll have the students reach out to you if they have more. But thanks so much for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing Blab grow big and huge and using it more and more in the classroom here, and I'll keep you informed on how things are going.
Hey, thanks for setting this up, and thanks to everyone who participated. Cool.
All right, take care, Shaan. All right, guys.